Good evening. If you would like, you can open up your Bibles to 2 Samuel chapter 9. 2 Samuel chapter 9. That's where we'll begin the new material for this quarter. Last class we reviewed, and we were looking at the beginning of the United Kingdom with Saul and then David, and really a contrast of two kings. And so the United Kingdom begins because the people want a king. They want an earthly king. They don't want God to be their king. And we talked about some of the challenges of having God as your king. First of all, some of them are not good reasons, but they are challenges. In other words, he's demanding. And so some people don't want a demanding king. That's not a good reason. He's holy. And so he's different from us. Well, that's not a good reason, except for this standpoint. Did God see it necessary to, in some way, present himself in a way that was easier for us to relate to? Yes, through Jesus. That's exactly right. And so from that standpoint, it fits with God's plan for people to say, yeah, we would like a human king. We would like a human king. And so what we have Saul as the first human king. Now, there's some attributes about Saul that look promising, but how was the reign of Saul? How did it go, their first human king? Not great. What were some of his problems? Pride. Jealousy. Come on now, Sherry's pulling all the load for y'all. Lack self-control. Very good. What's that? Disobedient. Selfish. Willing to sacrifice his own people for himself. And those type of things. So yeah, not great.
And also not willing to wait on to do a sacrifice. He actually done sacrifices he's supposed to have been waiting on.
Yeah. That's right. Now we've got David, a man after God's own heart. So this is the second attempt. This one was chosen by God. How does it go? Good. All right, so what are some of the qualities that are making this a good experience for the people? Loyalty. Humble. He inquires of the Lord. He trusts in the Lord.
He actually, at times, he didn't understand why the people didn't do, like even with Goliath. He said, y'all ought to be down there and done some of this heathen that's down here that's blaspheming our God.
So maybe encouraging. He's encouraging the people to be faithful in that. All right, very good. So up to this point, we've seen really nothing but good qualities from David. How has it gone as a nation? How's it gone for the nation of Israel that he's king over? Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Good. It's gone well. They've gained territory. They're prospering during this time. Things are going really well. As a matter of fact, in chapter 8, which I believe y'all concluded last quarter with, it's just kind of a summary of everywhere David goes, the Lord's with him, and they prosper, and they defeat the enemy, and they gain territory, and things are going really, really well.
You might say he's just regaining territory that they already previously owned, that Saul had lost control of.
That's
just
right.
Because of his focus and paranoia with David.
That's a very good point. Very good point. All right, so now what we're going to see at this point is we're going to see another chapter where we see some of David's best qualities. And really we're looking for that seed of woman who's going to come, who's going to defeat Satan. And what we're seeing in David is we're seeing a lot of those qualities that we would look for in one that is able to lead the people and defeat evil and so forth. Now in chapter 9, David says in verse 1, "Is there still anyone who is left of the house of Saul that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?" What I take it is, we've got this summary statement in chapter 8 of David's further conquest, and it almost comes to a point where he's kind of, up to this point, it's been pretty nonstop for David. He's had his hands full. He's had his hands full with Saul, then he had his hands full with establishing the kingdom and defeating the outside enemies, and now it's finally like, oh. And what does he think about? What does he remember? Jonathan. I made a covenant with Jonathan. What was that covenant? That's right. I'll remember his family with kindness. I wonder, is there anyone still around that I could show kindness to? This is probably almost 15 years into David's reign. So it's taken him some time to get to this point where there's enough of a pause where he remembers that. So here's another quality about David that we see. Faithfulness to the promises that he's made. This has been, well, I don't know exactly how many years, 20 plus years since he made that promise to Jonathan, and now he gets a break and he remembers it. And he says, I want to show kindness to someone in Jonathan's family. So he has to look to find someone who knows something about Jonathan's family. And he finds a servant named Ziba. And he calls him, and Ziba comes and says, at your service. And David says, is there not still someone of the house of Saul to whom I may show kindness, show the kindness of God? And Ziba said, there is still a son of Jonathan who is lame in his feet. Someone flip back to 2 Samuel chapter 4 and verse 4 and read that for me, please. 2 Samuel 4 and verse 4. When you find it, go for it.
Saul's son. I'm sorry.
You go for it.
Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. And his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened, and she made haste to flee, that he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So a number of years ago, again, we're guessing probably 15 years ago, you remember when Saul and Jonathan died in battle. When Israel heard of that news that they were dead, Saul's household fled. And so the nurse scooped up Jonathan's, how old was he? Scooped up Mephibosheth, 5 years old, and went to flee. And he fell. Somehow he fell, and he became lame. Now, the extent of his lameness, I don't know. If you look for artist rendition of it, he's always just got problems with his feet. He's able to use crutches and get around. I don't know if he was paralyzed from the waist down. I don't know. But he couldn't walk. He couldn't walk. And so we have the backstory here of this. But it's Jonathan's son. And so David has the opportunity to show kindness to him. Gerald, you got anything? So he calls for Mephibosheth. Now, I want you to think about this from Mephibosheth's standpoint. For the last 15 years or so, you've been brought up by servants. Your father's dead, and you've had this debilitating problem, this disability, but it's just kind of been a quiet life. And then all of a sudden, someone comes and says, King David wants to see you. How would you feel about that? Yeah.
The servants that raised him would do like what told other past that, he's probably going to kill you when you get there because you're the only descendant of Saul and Jonathan.
That's what normally happens. When a new dynasty takes over, they normally wipe out everybody else. And this may not be the first time that Mephibosheth has thought about this. He may realize, I could be in danger if I'm ever found out. Well, he's found out now. And not only is he found out, the king's calling for him. And it'd be hard to imagine him not being anxious about this meeting. But he comes. And he comes to David and he says, here is your servant. And David said, first of all, notice in verse 6, when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, had come to David, he did what? He fell on his face and prostrated himself. Now, you would normally bow before a king. The way this is worded, though, I get the idea that this is more than just...
This is mercy.
Yes, that's exactly right. Much like what we talked about this morning. In that he's falling down, prostrate before him, and saying, here is your servant. And what's David's first words to him? Do not fear. Do not fear. Obviously, he was fearing. And so David says, do not fear, for I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan your father's sake. I will restore to you all of the land of Saul your grandfather, and you shall eat bread at my table continually. This is, as Steve was mentioning, this is such a unheard of act of generosity towards the past dynasty that David was at war with and in a rivalry with. And so for this type to be shown, it shows us something. All right, so if we're looking for the ideal king, would we want a king that remembers his covenants, remembers his promises? Yes. Shows kindness and mercy? Yes. This is what we have in David. This is David at his best. All that we've seen about David up to this point is David at his best. This is a foreshadowing of the Messiah. And I think some would say maybe this is the promised one. This is what we've been looking for. This is everything that we could want in a king here. And Mephibosheth bows before David, and his response is, "What is your servant that you should look upon such a dead dog as I?" In other words, Mephibosheth is blown away by this and says, why would you even do this? This is unheard of. What do I have to offer you in this? And Mephibosheth doesn't have much. So what does David do in verse 9? Yeah. So he said he was going to restore the land that Saul had, the estate that Saul had. And so Ziba has been taking care of that estate. So he continues to tell Ziba, you take care of it. Who do the proceeds go to? Mephibosheth. Mephibosheth is now the master of this, but Ziba will continue to be a steward over it and take care of it. And Mephibosheth, what was his household like? He was pretty big. How many sons did he have? 15. How many servants did he have? 20. So he could take care of this estate. But what about Mephibosheth? Was Mephibosheth going to be there to oversee it, take care of it? Where was Mephibosheth going to be? David's table. David is almost adopting him as a son. As a matter of fact, I think that's what it says, that he will be at the table among the king's sons, like one of the king's sons. He's adopting him into his family. So you look at this once enemy of David. I say enemy only in the sense that his father's household was, Jonathan was not in rival, but Saul's family was in rival with David. And then here is this most unfortunate event that happens to him, and nothing seems to have gone right. And here he is before King David, who holds his very life in his hands, and David extends grace and mercy, favor to him, and exalts him to be one of the king's sons and to eat at his table. Does any of that ring a bell with you? What do you think of when I mention those things? We are Mephibosheths. I mean, really, you think about the exalted position that we are at, where we get to sit at God's table and eat with Him as one of His sons. How did all of this come about? Well, it came about by having a king who is very gracious and merciful and remembers his covenants and remembers his promises. And we have that opportunity because of that. So one of the things about chapter 9 is we get to get a glimpse of ourselves and our relationship with the Messiah. And we also see David still at his best here, what the Lord intended for him to be. Thoughts, comments through chapter 9? It could have been a minimum of 15 years. We have to be, you'd think, at least 20 years old at this point, so it could be longer than that. That's right. Yeah, that's a good observation there. Good observation. Any other thoughts? Okay, chapter 10. It happened after this that the king of the people of Ammon died, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his place. Let's look on our map here and get familiar. So this would be Israel during David's day. David has retaken quite a bit of territory here that Saul had lost, but the Philistines still have control of a large area. You've got Moab down here, Ammon right here, and the Syrians control a lot of territory that used to belong to Israel up here, to the half-tribe of Manasseh, is now under Syrian control. But Ammon is right here. Ramoth Ammon, their capital, is right here in the land of Gilead. And so the king dies. When was the last time we saw the king of Ammon? Do you remember the last story that we saw the king of Ammon in?
When they would let the children, well, long ago, when they would let the children of Israel cross over into the land made them go around.
Okay, all right.
Wasn't it Ammon that did that, or was that Moab?
What about their eyes?
Yeah. To answer your question, I don't know. I know what you're talking about, but I'm not confident in which one it is to say. And yes, Nahash, that's exactly right. Nahash, king of Ammon, had besieged Jabesh Gilead, which is going to be right up here, and threatened to put out their eyes. And so they said, well, let's see if we can get help. And that was Saul's first great victory. Saul's first great victory was over. Now, it may be the same king. That would have been 40 years ago. No, that would have been 50 plus years ago at this point, maybe 60 years ago at this point. So I don't know if it's the same king that dies here or not. It could have been maybe even his grandson at this point.
Nahash is just a kingly title.
I don't know that either.
That's what I've understood.
I think that's right. I think it's like you've got Abimelech as a kingly title, Pharaoh is a kingly title, Caesar, so forth. Nahash may have been a title as well. But his son comes to the throne, whoever this king is, his son comes to the throne, and David had a good relationship with the king who just died, the king of Ammon who just died. And so he sends ambassadors to go and to show kindness to Hanun, king of Nahash, as his father showed kindness to David. And so he sends the servants. Now, what kind of, if you're wanting to, as a king, you're wanting to pay respects to the loss of another dignitary or leader that is lost, what kind of servants would you send? What kind of ambassadors would you send?
The best of the servants. I mean,
Probably,
even today, when kings or anybody in power, all the countries actually send dignitaries, or even the president or
that's right.
kings or whatever actually goes to the country.
You don't send the paper boy to go. You send someone of importance. So undoubtedly David would have sent someone of importance. And so they come to pay their respects and to offer their condolences and so forth. But what do the advisors of the new king of Ammon tell their king? Yeah, they don't think that he's come here to pay sympathy to you. He's come here to spy it out. And he's planning on invading. And this new king, Hanun, believes them. So what does he do?
He shaves on half their beard.
Yeah, and does what else? Cuts off half their garments. So their buttocks are showing and, well, their cheeks are showing. Both cheeks, all cheeks are showing. And so this is quite humiliating. You know, if TJ'd look pretty funny if we shaved off half of his goatee and just left it on one side. But would that be a big deal to us? TJ, what would you do if somebody forced you to shave half your goatee? You'd shave the other half too, and you wouldn't think much about it, would you? You'd start growing it over again, and that'd be about it. That was not exactly the way it was in ancient times, at least for the Israelites. The Mennonites still kind of have this practice. The Mennonite beard is very, very important to them. You don't grow a beard or you keep it shaved until you get married, and then you grow a beard and you never shave it. And if they have to have some medical procedure where their beard is shaved, it's a big deal. It's a humiliating time for them. In ancient times, the beard was a sign of masculinity. It was a sign of manhood. It was a sign of wisdom and all of those things. And so this was an intentional act to humiliate them. I mean, obviously we get the idea of the garments being cut off halfway so they can't cover themselves. That would be humiliating. Why don't they just kill him? If they suspect them of being spies there, why don't the Ammonites just kill them and say, all right?
They're trying to humiliate them so that when David finds out about it, that he'll take it actually came from the king of his disappointment of them even showing up?
I think that they are trying to pick a fight here. They're trying to pick a fight. It's not just we suspect them of maybe trying to spy out. It's that they're throwing down a gauntlet and saying, all right, let's fight. And they're doing this by publicly humiliating the dignitaries that David has sent.
And this is really a shot at David. You know, they're representative of Israel, but this is really a message sent to David himself.
Yes.
I wonder if it would have been a new king if the advisors were inexperienced as well. Because David's got a track record of being not someone you want to go to.
Yes, I know. That does make you wonder, what are they thinking here? Because they are intentionally picking a fight with someone who's been very, very successful in fighting. And but that seems to be what they're doing. So yes, it does seem that maybe the new counsel for the king of Ammon is not that wise in that. Will this be the last time we see a new kingdom have inexperienced and foolish advisors?
Does
No.
remind you of Rehoboam.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's almost
He said he was possibly young, so they may not know of all of everything possibly could be very between.
yeah.
You were saying that,
Mephibosheth.
he was
Ye-
not okay last time.
Yeah. That's a.
He said they may not have heard all of it.
Yeah, well, they're about to find out. They are about to find out. They have made a mistake now. And so think about these poor ambassadors. You know, they are, we would assume they're honored men, and here they have to come back into town, and they make it back into Israelite territory. And what's the city that they go to? Jericho. And they stop there, and they send a messenger on to David telling what happened to him. And what is David's response to that? Yeah, don't come back in the capital city like that. Wait till your beards grow back in. And, he's trying to preserve some of their dignity before he brings them back into the capital city, allow them to stay there and their beards grow back.
Does this seem to imply that Jericho hasn't been built back?
So,
I mean, this would be more of a secluded area, it seems
Yes.
to imply.
yes, that's
So,
exactly right.
people would not see their shame, and they wouldn't be embarrassed.
That's right. So I can't remember the king. It's going to be during the days of the divided kingdom that Jericho will be built back. And the curse that was put on that by Joshua, that the man who rebuilt it would lay its foundation with the death of his firstborn and set its gates with the death of his last, would be fulfilled. But in the wilderness there, Jericho was a spot with water.
Right.
And so there was always some type of settlement there, but not necessarily a city with a wall, and so it would be a village that would be there. And so I think your point is it's a good point in that this would be more of a secluded area. They wouldn't be exposed to a lot of public scrutiny and so forth there, and so they remain there until their beards have grown back.
Also, they would actually be protected because it's on the other side of Jordan, so the Ammonites or any of the ones that may have watched them as they left, once they crossed the river, they probably went back to Ammon king instead of pursuing them because there's actually
In Israelite territory, yes, that's a good point. Good point. All right, but of course, how do you think Israel now feels towards Ammon? David and Israel, not favorable. Here we were trying to extend kindness to you, and you treated us this way. So David is not, as a matter of fact, it says that the people of Ammon saw that they were abhorrent, I think is the word that King James, repulsive in verse 6. They had made them...
ESV says stench.
Stench, yes. Stank, yeah. And so that's how Israel feels towards them now. And so the Syrians, I cannot help but believe that they did this to instigate, to pick a fight, because the very next thing that they do is what? They hire the Syrians as mercenary soldiers to come and fight because they're anticipating a war with Israel. And so some of the places that are mentioned here, Beth Rehob, and some of these places are going to be on the map. Some of them are not. You're going to notice you have Zobah, which is going to be right up here in this area. What else do you have that's mentioned here? Maacah, which is right here. And you have Tob, which is right here. And it says Ish from Ish-Tob. I assume that Ish is maybe a village or a city in the area of Tob there. So you see, the Syrians control this territory, and they're hiring the Syrians from this area to come down and to be with them in war against Israel. So, when David hears that they have hired the Syrians, David realizes, okay, I better get an army together because they're planning on fighting. So he gets an army together of all of his mighty men, and he goes down towards the capital city of Rabbath Ammon, right here. He crosses over the Jordan, brings his army to the capital city, and it says that Joab, who is his commanding officer, is leading the battle line, and he comes up, and when he gets there, planning to fight the Ammonites in the city, he realizes what? The Syrians are behind him. The Syrians are behind him.
Caught in a crossfire.
That's exactly right. And this was a precarious moment. This was a serious, you can tell by Joab's reaction, he realizes, we're in trouble. We're in trouble here. Look at what he says in verse 11. He says to his brother, Abishai, he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the people of Ammon are too strong for you, then I will come to you. Be of good courage, and let us be strong for our people and for our city, or for the cities of God, and may the Lord do whatever seems good to him. I think from that statement we see that this is not certain how this is going to turn out. So what he does is he divides his army, he takes some of his best fighting troops, and he leads them against the Syrians. I'll fight the Syrians. Abishai, you take the rest of the troop and you fight against the Ammonites. And whoever, if either one of us are in trouble, the other will rally to their help, and let's do our very best in being brave and fighting, and let the Lord determine this battle. I like that statement there. Now Joab is, it's hard to know how to feel about Joab. Joab has moments where he's as good as he can be. Wise, decisive, good judgment on things, and then other times where he's just as ruthless and cruel and just a snake. And this is one of those times where I see good in him. And I think his statement has a ring of truth to it. What does God expect us to do? Our best. Be brave and fight and do your best. But what else is a factor here that Joab realizes?
The Lord's will.
The Lord's will. The Lord's will. So we're going to do our best, and the Lord, whatever He sees best, let that work out. And I do think that's a right attitude. I think that's exactly what the Lord expects of us. He acknowledges we have a part in this, and God has a part in this. And so let it go how God wants it to go.
See, he didn't do like Saul did. Saul said, his pride, he always said, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Joab knew that what he was up against, the only way that they could ever win, that it wouldn't be what they was going to do, even though they made a split decision. But it was, he put it out, his faith in all, both of them did, that God was going to handle this problem that they were facing.
That's right.
Because he did that, him not being arrogant, I think that God actually used this event because the glory was going to go to him, not to the two men down there with the groups and spies.
That's right.
And, I think you see a difference here between, a man that's inspired and a man that's not inspired. With David, versus Goliath, he knew certainty of the outcome, how it was going to turn out. Here's a man that's not inspired, but how does he react? He still puts his faith, his trust in the Lord.
Yes.
And he accepts the Lord's will, whatever God decides.
Yes.
Well, whether he's going to die or live.
Yeah.
He's accepted the will of the Lord for what it is.
Good point. This is one of those places, while we're on that point, this is something that I have wrestled with, I guess, in the time that I've been a Christian, because you hear people say, well, you know what? We've got to have faith. No doubt the Bible teaches we have to have faith. And their definition of faith is, therefore, you just name it and claim it. You say, this is the way it's going to be, and God's going to be with us, and we're going to have this victory no matter what. And And I've always wrestled with that because it's like, well, I don't want to be a double-minded man that's unstable in all of his ways. I don't want to have a lack of faith. But at the same time, I'm not always as certain how it's going to turn out. And I think that there are a number of places where we see people, godly men, who have faith in God, say, if the Lord wills, let it be this. Or if need be. Or, in other words, they don't know either exactly how it's going to turn out. They're going to put their faith in God to do whatever's best, and they're going to do their best, but the outcome is still uncertain. And I don't think that's a lack of faith. I think that is a recognition of, we're on earth, God is in heaven. Let us be quiet. Let us be careful, because we don't know the outcome of everything. So what is the outcome of this battle? That's right. Ammon got a bad deal. They paid the Syrians money to come, and the Syrians show up, and when Joab and his fighting forces attack, the Syrians flee back home. And then what do the Ammonites do? They flee too. They go back in their fortified city of Ramoth Ammon and hide there. And so it says in verse 15, now when the Syrians saw that they had, let me back up here. Verse 14, when the people of Ammon saw that the Syrians were fleeing, they also fled from Abishai and entered the city. And so Joab returns from the people of Ammon and went back to Jerusalem. In other words, this was the first battle. This was the first battle that took place between Israel and Ammon. This will not be the last battle. This is going to be a series of battles that take place in this war. But in this first battle, the Syrians are driven back. The Syrians flee. The Ammonites are driven back. Joab goes back to Jerusalem. They have successfully defeated this threat of the combined forces of the Syrians and the Ammonites. The problem now is what happens when you're defeated? Well, you got a little pride problem now.
Pride's injured.
Yeah, that's right. So the Syrians sulk back home with their tails tucked and they decide, well, you know what? We got to have a better showing than that. That's embarrassing to take somebody's money and then not even fight, run off. We've got to do better. So what do? That's exactly right. Beyond the river, what does that mean? Yes. So off of this map, all the way up here somewhere, they're gathering all the Syrians that they can. Hadadezer is mentioned there. They sent and brought Syrians from Hadadezer's territory. Then Hadadezer sent and brought Syrians from beyond the river. And you see a number of places mentioned here again. Verse 17, when David was told, he says, all right, well, this war's not over then. And he gathers Israel together again, crosses the Jordan, and they come against the Syrians again. The Syrians set themselves in battle array against David, and he fights with them. And verse 18, what do the Syrians do this time? They flee again. And they fled before Israel. This time it mentions that David killed 700 charioteers and 40,000 horsemen of the Syrians and struck Sobak, the commander of their army, who died there. And when all the kings who were servants of Hadadezer saw that they were defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. And the Syrians were afraid to help the people of Ammon anymore. All right. So I want you to see all of this territory right here. These were a threat to Israel. They are no longer a threat to Israel. Do you see how much territory that the Lord has delivered into David's hands? So
It's actually bigger than what Israel had by that mount prior to David's start of the kingdom.
absolutely. Probably triple, quadruple the size when he first became king. A lot of territory has been gained. So here was David trying to show respect and faithfulness to a foreign king who he had favor with, and he was insulted in the process, and they tried to pick a fight with him, and this turned out to his benefit. Now this territory has been reclaimed for Israel in this. And so a decisive victory here, and the Lord has delivered all of this into his hand.
I think the coloring on the chart there, going back to what Steve was saying, indicates, I think the darker color is what David inherited when he first came into the kingdom. And then the yellow is what he conquers
Yes.
under his leadership.
Yes, because the Ammonites and the Moabites, by the end of his reign, will be paying tribute to him as well.
Right.
That's right. Yep. That is right.
And during all of this, you know, through the Syrians and the Ammonites and then all the people in Israel, that the glory was God's.
Yes. So how do you feel about having a human king right now, if you're in Israel? This is going great. This is fantastic. And I think we get a glimpse. It is fantastic. It is great. It's wonderful. Let's just stop right there. Let's not go any further this quarter. I was a little disgruntled that I missed last quarter, because last quarter is just some of the best material in the Scripture, you know? And this quarter is going to be disappointing. It's going to be disappointing. And that's the intention of this being recorded for us. When you just have a human king, even a great human king like David, there's going to be some problems. He's not perfect. He's not perfect. And see, we want a perfect king. And we're not going to find a perfect king in any man. In any man.
Jesus was a man that it says that he was made lower than the angels in the human form, and I think it's in John that he came to earth, and he was a man. Even though he's the Son of God, he was actually made a man. And we actually have a man that is king, that's the best the world has ever had.
I completely agree. And that's what we need. But he was more than a man. He was deity. You don't worship a man. You worship him. But I know your point is exactly right. And I take your point. But I'm making the flip side of that. That he was not just a man. Just a man's going to disappoint you. Deity in the flesh will not disappoint you. And that's what we're looking for. That's what we're longing for. So you're exactly right on that.
I take it that the deity come is that when he was transfigured, that God actually gave him all the power over everything. Even though when he was in flesh, he suffered as a man, he was tempted as a man, he had all the problems that we have, even though his father was God, but he was actually a man, is the way John describes it.
That's
right.
That's exactly right.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
And the Spirit, what was he, 30 before it came down? So, I mean, he hadn't sinned up to that point.
Right? Yeah.
Before that. So
Yeah.
he was.
Think about that. He'll be back straightening it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts before we get into chapter 11?
As a man, Jesus had a will of his own. He had a plan.
He was tempted in all points.
He said, not my will, but God's will be done.
Yeah.
That makes him.
Yes. That's right.
Well, he was Jesus when he was with God. He was the Godhead, so he's always.
Yes. That's right. That's exactly right. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's exactly right.
What do you think about the land that God took from the Syrians here? You know, Manasseh was a giant tribe.
Yes.
Do you think Manasseh got the land back?
Well, they're never going to have much control here. I mean, as far as they have control now, but it doesn't seem to be that Manasseh claims this as their territory again and occupies this territory. It seems like that they, from this point on, it's always, if they gain control of it, they're basically taxing the Syrians and so forth, as opposed to this being Israel's land proper. It's supposed to be Israel's land proper, but it doesn't seem that, yeah. Even in Solomon's time, it doesn't seem like that they were occupying
And it's
this
going to
land.
go a lot further north than,
Yes.
than that
That's right.
under Solomon.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Okay, we got 5 minutes. We're not going to waste any time. And so we'll get into chapter 11. Now, it came to pass in the spring of the year, at the time when what happens? What happens in the spring of the year? Kings go out to battle. It's hard to fight in the wintertime. You got other things you need to tend to, but the spring of the year is when most kings waged war. And so it seems that this will be the next chapter in this war with the Ammonites that's taking place. The Syrians have been defeated now, but Ammon hasn't been destroyed. The Syrians weren't afraid to help the Ammonites anymore, but now David sends his army out. And I just want you to notice this progression here, because there does seem to be a point here. It's not overemphasized, but it does seem to be some emphasis on it. In the spring is when the kings go out to battle. What does David do in the spring? Yeah, he remained at Jerusalem. He doesn't go out and lead his army. He sends Joab out to fight. Now, I don't know if that's a big deal or not, but it does mention that the kings go out to battle, and he sent Joab, and then verse 1 ends with, but David remained in Jerusalem. I do know this, and again, the text doesn't bring this out here, but maybe there is some emphasis on where he should have been as opposed to where he was. A king was supposed to be leading their army. The army's out fighting. The ark is out with the nation. David's in Jerusalem. What do they say is the devil's workshop? And maybe that's what's taking place here. David's not occupied with what his job is to be occupied with, and he finds trouble instead. I don't know, but that is the way life works sometimes. And maybe that's what's taking place here.
And, you're talking about time taking place. It says that they besieged Rabbah. So that indicates that Rabbah is a fortified city. And with a besiegement, what takes place with besieging the city? You surround it. And you basically try to starve them out, or, sometimes you would make attempts to overcome, but, usually it's, again, time. It takes time to overcome a fortified city in that way, besieging it. So that just kind of leads to, lends itself to this idea of David being in Jerusalem, not for a short time, but for a lengthy period of time here.
Yep.
And, what has he got to do?
Yep. Well, he's restless one night, and he goes out out of his palace, and he looks over his city, and what does he see?
The sheep are taking a bath.
You ever seen something that you shouldn't be looking at? Yes, every one of us have. Every one of us have. What do you do in that moment? Oh, I don't need to change the channel. Whatever it is, I don't need to expose myself to that. I don't need to see that. Turn around, David. Go back inside. That's not what he does. That's not what he does here. I do want to, since we just got a few minutes, let me nerd out on you here with some geography. This is a representation of what Jerusalem would look like in the time of David. It is built on a very steep slope hill, with his palace being up at the north of it. If we were to go there today, what we would see actually the foundation of the Jebusite palace that was there before David took it, but David built his palace on top of that. And so this would be this area right up here, and you can see how this drops off. Here's another view of it. The palace would have been up here, and you see how steep this is going down into the Jezreel Valley. The Kidron Valley here. It's pretty steep. And by the way, I want you to notice some things here. We'll take this view right here. This is standing up where the palace is, looking down into the valley. And you see these foundation stones right here? These were houses from that time. These are the foundation of the houses that were there in those times. And this is covered up now, but they would extend down all the way down to where you see these houses are down here. So the palace is up on a pretty steep hill looking down over the city and all of the houses that were down there. Do you understand how David could see something from that vantage point and that perspective? It's interesting to stand there and just imagine, he came out here to look and, he saw something. I don't know what to make of that. Some have said, well, Bathsheba shouldn't have been in a place where she could be seen. Okay. Sometimes things happen. I don't know. Nothing's said about Bathsheba here. What I do know is what David should have done. And what David should have done is turn around and go back. There's a saying that I've heard before that I've tried to apply that is helpful to me. And that is, someone said, you can't stop a bird from flying over your head. In other words, you're going to see things that you didn't mean to see. You can keep it from making a nest in your hair. David doesn't keep it from making a nest in his hair. David sees this beautiful woman. He finds her attractive. Anything problematic at this point? Nope.
He lived long enough to know that she was beautiful.
Yes, he did. And long enough that he etched some things in his mind that kept him longing and thinking and contemplating, lingering. And then it says that he sent and inquired about the woman. I don't know that this was wrong. Now, I do know at this point that David has what, 5 wives? So from that standpoint, I don't think that was God's intention. I don't think that's what God originally wanted, but has God tolerated polygamy up to this point? Yes. It doesn't seem like it would have been an overt rebellion against God for him to possibly take another wife. And so he inquires about her. Who is this? And he finds some information. What does he find out? She's married. This is the wife of one of your mighty men, Uriah the Hittite. Oh, I want you to think back when you were dating. And you saw someone and you were interested in them, and you said, hey, who is that? They're cute, or whatever. And someone turns around and says, they're married. What did you do at that point? Oh, I'm sorry. That should be the appropriate response. I'm not sure people always have that response. I think there'll be people who say, so? But David's not that type of person. David would surely recoil at this and say, oh, well, erase all of those, any intentions that I had there. That's done with. That's the David we know, right?
Up to this point.
Up to this point. We'll find out next time. Thank you for your good attention. Appreciate your comments as well. Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.